Hello, people of God. Today, I want to talk to you about being people. We are people, and as people, we are made to be in relationships. We're made to be in relationship with each other and with God. Now, I want you to think about relationships for a minute. Have you ever been in one that you were so close to someone you could finish each other's sentences? It's kind of delightful to know someone that well, that you're just so in tune that you automatically know what they're thinking or what they need or what they're going to say. Well, we think we know. Here's the thing about relationships. The best relationships in the world rely on communication. And we need to be good at communicating what we need and what we want. It's no different in our relationship with God. We need to communicate with God and constantly tell God what's on our minds, what we're thinking, what we want, what we need. When we talk to God, something great happens. We might think of God as all-knowing and all those omni words, omnipresent and omniscient, and it's true. But part of the relationship building is our willingness to tell God what's on our mind. I'd like for you to turn to Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 to 23. The story, it's about Moses having another conversation with God. And it's a very vivid story. The imagery is wonderful, where we see God personified. Moses wants to see God's glory, and so God hides Moses in the cleft of the rock and covers him with his hand. That's beautiful imagery. But let's talk about what gets us to that point in the story. You see, the people have not been doing what God had commanded in those 10 commandments. And Moses has kind of lost it with the people. And he's having another conversation with God. And God has made a decision. The people should move on to the promised land, but God is not going with them. That causes a bit of a panic to think of God not being present with the people. Moses is persistent in his desire to know God and to make God pleased. We see that in declaring the name of God and knowing God's name and God knowing Moses' name. And we see this in the scripture about being pleased, God being pleased with the people. Moses strives to have that kind of a close relationship. He wants to have God's favor, but Moses does not want to continue the journey without God's presence. What makes the people of God, is the presence of God with them. Did you catch that? What makes us the people of God is God with us. God is with us. It might not be the way that we expect it, but the presence of God never leaves the people of God. This is the reassurance that Moses needed and the reassurance that he received. You see, Moses really, really wants to know. The people really, really want to know that God's not going to stay on the mountain, that God's going to continue to be with them. In this passage, what I want us to focus on is that Moses tells God what Moses needs and what Moses wants. Moses asks to see the glory of God. We talked about this briefly already, about the rock and the cleft and God's human imagery. We see that God has a hand and there's a backside and a face. There's even God walking. But there's also protection and presence of God in this story. See, God knows to see God's self will be too much for Moses. But God recognizes the desire of Moses' heart. Moses wants to catch a glimpse of the glory of God. So God finds a way to make that possible. Can't look at Moses in the face, but Moses can catch a sideways view. Now, I don't know about you, but my backside, that's not my best feature. But seeing the backside of God, that could be enough. See, the glory of God is the glory of God, front, back, or sideways. God considered the frailty of humanity and agreed to give one person direct access to God. That one glimpse of God's glory from the backside. This was the beginning of something bigger. You see, this is part of that relationship that we have with God, is being able to be frail human beings, telling God what it is that we need for our reassurances, to make our relationship deeper. But this consideration of God for Moses, it truly was the beginning of something bigger. See, God continued to consider the frailty of humanity, as well as our bent for sinning, combined with our deep need for that relationship and conversation with God. God then gave all people, not just one, direct access to God through Jesus Christ. Friends, God is merciful. God is gracious. God protects us from what we cannot handle, from what we cannot understand. And God is with us. The presence of God is where we can have our conversations with God. We can tell God exactly what we need. For Moses, it was to catch a glimpse of the glory of God, to know that God wasn't going to stay on the mountain, but would still be with them. To know that God was still leading God's people. So what is it that we need from God? Think about all the things that you wish for our congregation or our community of faith. Have you told God about those things? Are you willing to be like Moses and intercede on behalf of the people of God? Talking with God about where we are, what we do, and what we need? How about in your own life? The same applies. If we aren't willing to name our challenges before God, how can we ever hope to overcome them? Talking things through with God can bring us clarity and understanding. It can be what gives us direction. So remember this part of the story. Moses went to the sacred place to have the conversation with God. It was an intentional act on his part to seek God for the conversation. Wherever you are, you can find God. We don't have to go up on high mountaintops. We don't have to be in sanctuaries or churches. Wherever we are, God is with us. The challenge for us people is making the time to have the conversation we need with God. So set aside the things that separate you from God. Make an appointment with God on your calendar. Intentionally seek God's presence. Let's give God a chance to protect us, provide for us, to be present with us. Hiding in the cleft of the rock, covered by the hand of God, that's how the story ends today. But for us, the story doesn't stop there. Moses was seeking the encounter on behalf of the people. He was asking for God's continued presence with the people of God. We are called to do the same. We're tasked to be disciples of Jesus Christ, to transform the world in his name, to go and make disciples and teach them what Jesus taught us, to share with them what Jesus shared with us. We're called to be like Moses, to learn from his leadership and the people and the relationship he had with God. So today, we remember that God meets the needs of the people while protecting them. God listens to the people when the people tell God what they want and what they need. God met Moses' need to encounter God's glory while protecting Moses from harm. We, beloved children of God, made in God's own image, are called to help to meet the needs of others while protecting them. And we can do this because God is with us. We just need to talk to God, and we can. Thanks be to God.